Today we're going to be diving into the Humanize feature in the MPC. This feature is actually in all the newer MPCs. I've seen it before, I never really paid attention to it until recently. I started exploring it a bit more, and I've actually been able to generate new grooves, new ideas that I probably wouldn't have done myself. This feature is actually going to be very helpful for those of us that are not comfortable with our natural grooves. If we're performing, if we're not the best finger drummers, this Humanize feature is actually going to be amazing. Before I go any further, I do want to remind you guys that there is timestamps, so if you guys want to skip this introduction, feel free to jump right into it. But I do want to explain a little bit on how we will use this Humanize function. This is going to be if you're quantizing. I'm going to be using drums in this scenario, but let's just say we're quantizing our drums, which there's nothing wrong with that. Trust me, if you are not a good finger drummer, just quantize. I remember when I was just starting, I would try to do my own grooves, but it sounded bad. So just go ahead and quantize and use this function to add a bit of swing and groove to your performance. Now, this feature will work with if you're performing keys or anything. It doesn't matter what it is, any MIDI performance that you have on the grid, you can go ahead and humanize it and add some variation. This is something that's gonna affect the timing of your performance and also the velocity of your performance. So let's jump right into it and show you guys how I'm using this Humanize feature. So right here we have a beat, and I really like everything. I enjoy how it's coming along. As you guys can hear, this is my sample right here. And right here I have my drums. Now my drums, I always talk about I enjoy sampling live drums and all that, but it's not always the case. In this case, my drums are just regular one shots. Now these drums, they're on the grid. If we go to the grid editor, we can zoom in, and everything is quantized and everything is on the grid. If you guys are quantizing, you have your performance tight, everything's on the grid, there's nothing wrong with that. What we can do now is utilize these tools. Right here on my drums, like I showed you guys, everything is on the grid. Now on this track where I have my drums, if you hit this pencil icon, this will pop open and you'll see these different settings on your editor. Now right here, there is the Humanizer. If you click on the Humanizer, this screen pops up. And in this screen, you got different parameters. One of them is gonna be humanize the time, which this is gonna humanize your performance, your timing. And then you have humanize the note length, which is gonna humanize how long these MIDI notes are on the grid. And then you have your humanize velocity, which is going to add some variation to your velocity performance, which I will use this on my hi-hats to make it groove a little bit better. And then at the very end, you have only apply to selected events. So if you don't want to randomize or humanize the whole entire drum performance, let's say you just want to select the hi-hat, then you can just engage that setting and it's only gonna select whichever pad you have selected. So if we go up here on Humanize time, make sure none of these are selected. Make sure they're not on the check mark. Let's just make sure the Humanize time is selected. And right here, you're gonna have two options. You're gonna have your amount pulse, and then you're gonna have your eagerness. The amount pulse is just gonna be how drastic is it going to shift around your notes on the grid. So for an example, if I'm all the way down right here, you guys can see this note that pops up at the very bottom. It says a very small amount. Pretty much it's still going to sound mechanical. It's still going to be on the grid. It might shift a few ticks forward or backwards, but it's not going to make a big difference. And then as you're going higher and higher, you're going to have a small amount, which is still kind of humanized, which I actually like this section. It's not going to shift them as much. And as you keep going higher and higher, now this is going to be less than a 64th note. As it goes higher, mainly what this is going to show you guys is how drastic are the notes going to shift. As you guys know, you got quarter notes, you got 16th notes, and then the increments get smaller and smaller. Now, if you're all the way up here in 16th notes, exactly 16th notes, it's going to be very drastic. And I don't really recommend you guys go that drastic. It's just going to shift your notes a little too much. You guys can play with this. There's not a right or wrong, but I usually like to stay somewhere right here less than 64th notes or a very small amount. Now right here on the eagerness, this is gonna determine if you guys leave it at 0, it's going to shift your notes either forward or backwards. It's just gonna be random. If you guys go on the negative numbers, it's going to shift your notes. Most likely it's gonna be ahead of the grid. So as you guys can see, often ahead of the beat. So it's going to kind of shift them more to the left of the grid. So if you guys want to just select your snare hits and go towards the negative values, it's going to randomize those snare hits most likely before the grid. This is just going to determine if you want them to be mainly before, or if you guys want to go to the positive, this is going to shift them a little more after. It's still going to be some before, some after. It's just going to randomize it, but you guys can go very drastic. I'm going to go ahead and just leave it at 0, and we'll start right here and see what we come up with. So before I jump any further, what I'm going to do is this sequence is my original sequence, not quantized. Let me copy this sequence. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to make this one the Humanize. Now we got sequence 1 is the original that's quantized on the grid, and sequence 2 is going to be the humanized one. So in order for us to do it, again, we're going to hit select our drum track, hit the little pencil icon, go to Humanize, and we're going to make sure these are all not selected. We don't want those to be selected, just the humanized time. And right here, I'm going to leave the eagerness at 0, and the amount of pulls, I'm going to just start off with a very small amount. Real quick, let's just hear it one more time with it on the grid. So this is how it sounds on the grid. So what I'm going to do, if you hit apply, it's going to apply the changes while you have this window page open. So you guys can go ahead and do trial and error right here. If you hit do it, it's going to go ahead and apply it and close the window. So I don't want to close the window. I'm going to just hit apply. So now it did those changes. Let's hear what type of changes it made. Cool. So I don't know if you guys heard it. It's a very small amount. You can't really notice as much. Let's go a little more drastic. But before I go a little more drastic, I'm going to hit undo. So it goes back to it being quantized 100%. I'm going to go a little more drastic, and I'm going to push it a little before it jumps over to the 64th notes. So I'm going to go right here. I'm going to hit apply. Let's hear what it does. There you go. So you guys can definitely hear that right there. Let's go to the grid and let's see what it did to our notes. If we zoom in, you guys can see they're off the grid. They're not really perfectly on the grid. So it created some variation, and obviously you can hear it. That's much better. I don't know if you guys can feel that and hear that, but that actually created some groove and some swing that you're not going to have if you're quantized perfectly on the grid. If you guys can, I'm going to go very drastic so you guys can hear how it goes. Now, less than 64th notes, hit apply, and let's hear this. Actually, it still sounds pretty interesting in a weird way. It came together pretty good. So as you guys can see, the further up you guys go on this pulse amounts, the more drastic is going to shift your notes left or right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and leave my pulse amount to at about, I want to go right here, about 29 or 30%. I'm going to go ahead and hit do it. So now it went ahead and shifted my notes just a bit. So let's hear what that did. Awesome. I like what that did, and it's sounding pretty good. Way better than just being quantized on the grid with no feel to your performance. Another thing I want to cover is going to be the velocity section. The velocity section is very important as well because everything is at one velocity. Nothing has like louder notes and lower notes. Everything's just one velocity. So what we'll do is on our hi-hats, let's go ahead and select our hi-hats. Make sure you guys are going to select it. Mines are right here. As you guys can see, it's selected the whole entire hi-hat section of that row. And make sure that's selected. Once that is selected, we go back to the main menu. We hit this little pencil icon, go to Humanize, and make sure you turn off the Humanize time, or else it's gonna, affect the timing again, and it's gonna shift it even more. So make sure that's not selected. Make sure the length is not selected. Now on velocity, select velocity, and also you're gonna wanna select apply only to selected events, because we only want to affect the hi-hat. So now on Humanize velocity, this is very simple. There's only one parameter right here. This is how drastic you want to have this velocity jumping up or down. What we'll do, we'll start at like about 20, let's do 25% and hit apply, and let's see how much velocity changes that gives us. Hit play. That's nice. That's not bad at all. I'm going to hit undo, so it's back at the same velocity. What I'm going to do, I'm going to go a little more. I think we can push it a bit more. Let's go to 35, and let's hit apply. Let's see what this does. There you go. That's adding some swing to your performance now. Now you got dynamics. You got not the same quantized performance, which sounds very boring. I'm gonna hit undo and let's push it. I'm gonna push this to at about 71%. Hit apply. Let's see how that sounds. That, sounds pretty good. That still doesn't sound bad. I'm going to hit undo, and I'm going to go to the highest value so you guys can hear the huge difference that this will do. Hit apply. Obviously, that's a little too much. I actually don't like how that sounds. I'm going to hit undo, and I'm going to leave it at about let's do 37%, hit apply. I'll leave it right there. Now, if we go to this hi-hat performance, if we zoom in, let's go to velocity. As you guys can see, now the velocity on the hi-hats, they're all over the place. They're jumping up and down. Some of them are high, some of them are low, which is not going to be the same boring note just being repeated over and over, which trust me, it does not sound intriguing at all. So now if we compare our sequence, our original sequence, which is all 100% quantized versus our new sequence, which we humanize, let's hear the difference of what it made. This is the original. So obviously sounds a lot better, and is not just the same note being hit over and over again. Now I am focusing on the timing and the velocity of your drums, but if you guys want to dive in a little more deep into the MPC One, make sure you guys check out some of my other videos. I'll leave links up here to some of my other videos on the MPC. Again, guys, this is going to work for any of the newer MPCs. And one last thing, thank you so much for tuning in to today's video. If you guys enjoyed this content, make sure you guys give it a thumbs up, and also subscribe to the channel if you guys are not subscribed to this channel already. Thank you. I'll catch you guys on our next video. Peace.